I don't believe I will ever be a finished article of anything, a professional person, a mother, any of that stuff. You know, I'm always learning, and that is absolutely fine. So have that belief that you can understand what your value is, and don't think that you need to tick all the conventional boxes in terms of, you know, your education, whether you've got a degree, what your results were, what school you went to, you know, whether you've done an MBA or taken a postgrad or whatever those things are.
This is The Talent Show, a new podcast series from FT Talent, a hub of innovation from the Financial Times. It's hosted by under 30s for the under 30s around the world. This second series is about all the aspects the FT organization is covering today, from editorial to development, from data to talent. I am Virginia Stagni, and this is a guide we designed to inspire you to be the one driving innovation and change. Welcome to the show. London Financial Times podcast studio, and today I have a very, very interesting person at our mics because she has been really exploring different departments and ways at the Financial Times, but is also our point of reference when it comes to yoga, meditation, and mental health at the Financial Times. And I'm really pleased to have Isabelle Campbell with us. She's the Vice President of Portfolio in the Product and Technology Department here at the Financial Times. She has a background as well in finance, and she'll tell us all about this amazing career path at the Financial Times. How long have you been here, Izzy?
Well, I have been here for 14 years this year. I can hardly believe it, but yeah.
What did you study before joining the FT?
So I actually did English literature at university, so it was a surprise to everybody when I decided to go and become an accountant. So I went into one of the big four professional services firms. And why did I do that? Well, I wanted to move to London. I heard the salary was all right. And that is honestly the reason why I went into finance. I knew that I wanted to study more as well. So it was kind of a toss-up between law and finance, and studying accountancy was a way of getting paid to study, whereas with law I would have had to have stuck on at university for another couple of years, and frankly I just couldn't really afford to do that, so I ended up in finance.
What does it mean doing an accountant job at the Financial Times?
So when I moved into finance at the FT, I was in what I would call a traditional accountant role, which is what we might call in the industry, you might see it as a job description, as a financial accountant. So it was all about looking at the results of the business. So, you know, how we'd performed in a month, how we'd performed in a quarter, in a year, recording those results, reporting them. At the time, we were owned by a listed parent company. So there was, you know, lots of things we had to do for that. It was quite what I would call technical, so needing to know your accounting standards, your accounting rules, and making sure that we're reporting in the right way. The work didn't necessarily inspire or delight me, but the environment did, and I managed to find my path and find my way through that route.
Fairly recently, you changed very courageously, I must say, your career path, because you moved from finance to the product and tech department as a VP of the portfolio. So, first of all, why P&T? Why this career move? And what makes you excited about this new role?
Yeah, again, not something I would have ever imagined would happen. So because I had those networks and those relationships, I had a good, you know, working relationship with our CPTO who heads up our department in P&T, and I actually business partnered him. So where I came into the FT as I said, a more traditional accountant type role, I've moved around within finance and moved into a commercial finance role a good few years ago, probably 7 years ago now. And as part of that role, I business partnered the product and technology department. So I was their point of support from a finance perspective. So helping them to understand their numbers, you know, their investments, things like that. So I was getting quite close to products and technology already. It's a very fast-moving, exciting space to be in, for one thing. And actually, I always thought that finance was quite fast-paced. But actually, having made that move, I mean, it's just not comparable at all. Someone said to me yesterday, you know, in P&T, things are never done. You know, in finance, it might be very hard to get there, and you know, and we have those deadlines and those cycles, but your year end is done when it's done, and you have to have it done. Your month end, your forecasting process, you know, all these processes that we go through in finance to understand our numbers, you know, they do get to done. there's usually something else immediately that comes up next, and there's curveballs all the time, of course, and people are asking for things and things are changing. But in products and tech, it sort of feels like nothing is done. And that's exciting because we're developing new things, technology is changing all the time. We're running, our website has so much that sits behind it that is actually quite hard to understand. Our website, our apps, all our different products, and these things are changing and moving all the time. And the demands from editorial, from commercial, from the outside world are just constantly in flux. And, my role is a lot about how we, as a products and technology department, deliver what we want to deliver. So, we have product as a discipline and technology as a discipline, and they are looking at, the why and the what. And my discipline in portfolio is looking at how. So how do we deliver that? When the opportunity came up, I was really keen to go and work for my now boss and that team. I was really keen to be a part of that department. I really liked what I saw, as a kind of subculture within the great culture of the FT.
Here at FT, you offer some yoga classes as well and meditation classes. You have been helping us quite a lot throughout COVID, and this has been a fantastic thing, I believe, to see that an employee was as well seen and in a certain sense like recognized as someone that could help and inspire others in being closer in a difficult moment and building another community of yogis. What pushed you to enter in the yoga space?
I've always practiced yoga, from sort of late teens, but I didn't really embrace or understand the power of the spiritual side of it. For me, it was more like exercise, getting my body strong, that kind of stuff. And I guess as I went a bit further into that journey of, self-awareness and things like that, I really started to understand the spiritual side of it and the impact of it. So all of that mindfulness, that kind of, embracing the present moment, etc. And I've become quite spiritual, actually, I think, over the last 10 plus years. So I've always been one to push myself to learn, to do more. And I'd done the non-exec director diploma, which the FT offers. So I'd done that course. And I had an idea that I wanted to do an MBA. I don't really know why, but I just thought, I want to do something else. What's next? And I thought, actually, do you know what? I'm not going to do an MBA. I'm going to do my yoga teacher training. And that was a kind of, what I decided to invest my money in and my time, of course. And so I did my yoga teacher training over a year and I qualified. And when I went into it, I thought, I'm just doing this to enhance my practice, to, build more awareness and understand the philosophy and, the Sanskrit language and, all of that kind of stuff. But I found that I loved to teach. So I loved to use my voice and to teach people and, support people in that way. Yeah. And so I started to think, well, what can I do? And of course I could have, gone down to my local gym or, hired a space or figured out a way of teaching in a studio. But actually I thought, I'm a pretty busy person anyway, so it makes sense for me to be able to drop some classes into my place of work anyway. And B, I have a ready-made, audience of people that are keen. And so we started to teach, but that was just before COVID, of course. So that did need to go on pause for a while, and we found offerings online and, and things like that. And now we're back. In fact, I've only this year started to teach back again in person. So we've been back in our little studio here at Bracken House for the last 6 months. And it's my real pleasure and passion to be able to take that time and that space with people.
And what have you built thanks to these trainings in terms of community and people here at FT? Did you meet new people, and what is their approach to mental health?
I've met lots of different people from lots of different departments. We have a real community of yogis. So we have a setup of, there's a lot of people on the email list and in our little Slack group as well. Of course, not everyone manages to make it to class, but we have that real little community and people share. And especially during lockdown, we were doing midweek meditation. So I would do a weekly live stream of 10 minutes and we would just meditate together. And we had this little community coming together. And that was really lovely. And I think what I've learned from other people is that they, lots of people similar to me are either passionate about yoga or just want to take the space in their day. We're teaching at lunchtimes now. We used to teach in the mornings. Lunchtimes is harder. It's harder for people to stop what they're doing, to come away from their desk, to come and get changed and come to the mat. But people really feel strongly about the need to do that, to take care of themselves in that way.
Can you describe a bit more what does it mean to be a VP of the portfolio of different products that we have. Did you have any shadowing inductions besides, of course, you were the business partner, so to really understand a bit more the world of product and tech that made you so passionate about it?
I really just jumped feet first into the deep end, and my boss and I knew that that's what we were doing, and we decided we were going to jump in together and believe that we would make a success of it. So we are still very much in that phase of forming the team and, you know, figuring out our boundaries and how we're going to work together. So we have a chief product officer, we have a chief technology officer, a chief data officer, and we have a VP of cyber. And together with them and myself, we form the leadership team of product and tech. So product and tech is 600 strong. We have, you know, all these engineers and product people and data people working to create what the customer sees, right? To get the actual physical newspaper out the door, to have the website, the app, all our different titles, everything that you see there, as well as keeping us running, keeping us secure, making sure all the staff have got laptops, that the Wi-Fi works, you know, all of that stuff is encompassed in our department. And yes, as I say, my team is about the how. So how do we do that? How do we fund it? How we use our headcount, the investment that's available to us, how we optimally run teams and are able to deliver those products that I mentioned, and to do all the things that the department is responsible for. So my role is very much enabling, I would say. So working alongside that CPO, CTO and CDO that I mentioned, the product, tech and data, who have their responsibility for their domains. My responsibility is to lead the team that enables and facilitates.
What is your best piece of advice for a younger person that is not so sure about what to pick as a first career move? They might have an interesting place to work in mind, but they don't really know how to get that foot in the door. What would be your approach?
Can I have 2 pieces of advice, please?
Of course, even free.
So my first one would be around self-belief, that you can and you will, and, you know, not being guided by fear. So if I had have let that overwhelm me, I would never have applied for the job that I currently have, because I would have read the job description and thought, well, I don't know how to do 75% of that. And I think there is a real common theme there where people think they have to be the finished article. I don't believe I will ever be a finished article of anything, a professional person, a mother, any of that stuff. You know, I'm always learning, and that is absolutely fine. So have that belief that you can understand what your value is, and don't think that you need to tick all the conventional boxes in terms of, you know, your education, whether you've got a degree, what your results were, what school you went to, you know, whether you've done an MBA or taken a postgrad or whatever those things are. You know, think a bit more broadly and have belief in the qualities that you have. So that would be my first thing. And then my second thing, which is related, is don't imagine that you need to have the answers. I was away last week on a course, and it was a residential course, and I met some new friends, and one of them said to me, you know, what's next? What comes next in the next sort of 2 years, 5 years? And probably for the first time in my life, I was very comfortable to say, I have no idea, and that's fine. You know, and early on, I was very much, okay, get the degree, do the postgrad, pass the exams, then you'll become this, then you'll become this. You know, what's next? What comes down the track on the career path? And if I'd have maintained that rigidity, I would never have had the opportunity to do all of the different things that I have. And, you know, who says you can't be a professional person in a leadership role, but also teach yoga, but also work as an executive coach, but also do other things? Who says that that's what you know, that you have to fit this kind of mold? And I think the FT is great for that, and particularly the current environment that I'm in with my current boss and my peers, you know, very much celebrating otherness, very much celebrating doing different things, being unexpected.
Pragmatic advice. How do you build the tree of whys and because? Do you write it down? Do you have a journal? What is a habit that you would like to recommend to us?
So I do journal, yes, and I journal more. The more chaotic and busy things get, and the more overwhelmed I feel, the more I journal, and it helps to ground me. I meditate a lot, as you might imagine, and that's something that is often at the bottom of the list. If I've got a to-do list, you know, I mean, my to-do list with work is unending, as I say. Nothing's ever done, and I, of course, have a to-do list for home, kids, etc. The more that builds and feels overwhelming, the easier it is to let things like self-care drop off. So I prioritise them at the top. my pragmatic advice about, building awareness, if you have the negative thinking patterns, if you have a tendency to catastrophize about what might happen, to think forward all the time or to be thinking back, and you want to pattern interrupt. For me, to begin with, I had to write that down. So I would write down, what's happened, what's the thing that's happened. That could be a work thing, it could be a comment someone had made, it could be something that happened at home. What's the belief that I'm attaching to that, which might be, you're not good enough, you can't do this, you'll fail. And then what's the consequence of that? The consequence usually being, I don't feel very good, I feel irritable, I feel upset, whatever, I can't concentrate. So it's going through those kind of stages just to put that space in and allow you to pattern interrupt by asking the question, is there another way of looking at this? Is it true that I can't do this? Is it true that I'm doing a bad job of this? And so I started writing that down, which is quite time consuming, as you would imagine. And then I started to sort of not write it down, but to run it through in my head. So to ask myself those questions quite clearly. And these days it kind of runs fairly organically. I don't stop and think about it. I'm able to run in that way. And we don't have time to get into neuroscience here, but there is a lot around, our ability to lay down neural pathways when we repeat activity in the brain, when we repeat this kind of behaviour. And so it comes quite naturally to me now. But sometimes if something significant happens that makes me feel significantly challenged, I will go back to writing it down and working it through in that way.
How do you keep concentrated while doing this and not distract yourself? Because that's, I think, the hardest thing to do today with our smartphones, with the job that we all have here, especially working in news. How do you keep concentrated?
I'm very disciplined and boundaried around how I allow myself to be contacted. So I don't have any notifications anywhere. I have a separate work phone to home phone so that I can switch it off or leave it somewhere else. My personal phone is off. I have focus mode on between 9 o'clock in the morning and 6 o'clock in the evening. I have sleep mode on from 9 p.m. And that's not to say I don't go in and, and self-serve my notifications, but I have no notifications for anything. I have a smartwatch, but it doesn't show me anything in terms of notifications. If I don't ask it. I'm not afraid to put my boundaries out to people, to tell them. And that includes my social life as well. Because I think everything shouts very loudly if you let it. And all these things are set up, they're designed to give us these hits of dopamine, even if it's a work email or a work message that we might not welcome. The brain doesn't recognise that, so it still delivers this hit of dopamine that tells us that we're wanted and needed. And that can be quite addictive. Same social media, WhatsApp, etc. So I am very boundaried around what I allow in. I'm not always brilliant at it, don't get me wrong. Sometimes I find myself scrolling on Instagram and I think, gosh, I've been doing this for 20 minutes. But generally speaking, I don't access social media Monday to Friday. I don't access news notifications either, which might be a controversial thing to say in an environment like this. But I just don't think I'd ever get anything done, really. And, context switching. My role requires me to context switch an awful lot, much more than it did in finance. And that is a tax on the brain. There is a tax on that. It takes, there's research around how long it takes you to return to full focus in a task if you allow yourself to be distracted, whether by picking up your phone, having a conversation with someone, whatever. Or just, sometimes if I'm doing a task that I'm perhaps not enjoying that much, I choose to context switch. So I choose to go off and do something I might prefer to do, like send an email to someone or, fill out an invoice for some work I've done or whatever it is. But in so doing, I am giving myself a tax when I return to the piece of work I need to do.
Izzy, thank you so much. This has been great. And as you might know, one part of our podcast that is a bit different from other FT podcasts is that we welcome some bright young people to the podcast studio. And we got here Annika and Connie to ask some questions. So Annika, over to you.
Hi, my name is Annika and I'm currently going into my final year of maths at the University of Warwick. And thank you so much for having me here today. I'm really excited. And I'm here as Director of Outreach of the Women of Colour Blueprint. So we are a social mobility initiative that aims to dismantle a system where women of colour may face certain barriers to progress within their respective fields. And at the Blueprint, we focus on finance, tech and law in the UK. And we have three main aims. So firstly, to empower and to celebrate women of colour, successful women in their respective sectors. Secondly, to inform, to publish DEI and diversity statistics and research, and most importantly, to change. So in the long term, we hope to help guide organisations on how they can create change in their workplace culture. Really excited to be here today as part of the initiative, so thank you so much.
Annika, what's your question for Izzy?
So Izzy, as a leader, at the Women of Colour Blueprint, we love having conversations with women. And as part of these open discussions, a big topic that comes up is progressing within your respective industry, particularly from middle management and up and rising through those ranks. And as a leader yourself, do you find that your hiring practices have changed at all? And what do you think that companies can do more of to perhaps implement more women in those more senior positions?
Yeah, great question. So we at the FT, very fortunately, are very well supported in terms of our ability to hire and consider diversity and inclusion initiatives. So it is something that I've learned talking to other people in other industries and other smaller organisations and bigger organisations that are not as well supported. So we're very fortunate here that we have practices around hiring, things like blind CVs, things like, diverse panels, diverse pool of candidates before we go to interview and that sort of thing. But one thing that I think is super important, both during hiring and, in the workplace, is role modelling. And that's something that's always been important to me. So as we were talking during the main body of the podcast, I talked about vulnerability-based leadership. And for me, it's very important to be my authentic self and to role model that, the challenges that I have, be that, as a working mother, be that some of the things I've talked about here today in terms of, self-belief. And similarly, we are very keen on role modelling, good practices within the business. And I think that is the thing that is the most powerful. I think putting good hiring practices in place is important. I think having diversity and inclusion initiatives is important. But really, I think role modelling behaviours is the most powerful thing that we can do.
That's great. Thank you so much.
Connie, how are you today?
I'm good, thank you. So I'm Connie Q, and I've just finished studying for my A-levels, and I'll be studying for my history undergraduate this September. I'm here as a representative of the Women of Colour Blueprint, and as an aspiring journalist, I also work for the Corporate Law Journal as a junior political editor, and my passions are in gender equality and the media industry. So my question for you is that, as a female leader in a traditionally sort of male-dominated kind of industry, what barriers have you kind of had, and how have you been able to navigate these?
Interesting question, because I must say that I don't really feel that I have faced many barriers as a woman. And I am so lucky to be in an organisation which perhaps surprisingly to people on the outside is not the male-dominated environment that you might expect it to be. I mentioned earlier that when I first came to the FT, I thought it would be this very serious organisation. Everyone would be wearing pinstripe suits and, and obviously our readership has reflected that. And, we are moving the needle there. But actually inside, I have never felt that as a female that holds me back, or I've not really noticed it, I must say, which I'm aware makes me very privileged and very lucky, because I know lots of other people have. One thing I would say that I noticed within myself was that I felt that as a female of a certain age, i.e. of childbearing age, sort of 10 plus years ago, I was conscious as to whether that had an impact on whether people wanted to hire me or whether they wanted to promote me. And I've never had a sense of that here within the FT, but my own sense was that, perhaps, now might not be a good time to move jobs, or now might not be a good time to apply for a promotion. But I'm happy to say that, I have not experienced that at all. And in fact, as I mentioned, I was promoted from maternity leave, and, we've just had someone in our department who's been promoted into quite a senior role, and she's due to go off in 3 months or so on mat leave. So probably that is the most, relevant experience of being a female that I've found. But actually I am really fortunate to say that I've not really experienced barriers in terms of my voice being heard or opportunities that I've had.
Great, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, ladies. And of course, Isabelle Campbell, thanks for being with us. And thanks to all our listeners out there. And I can't wait to have you here for the next episode. Bye. This has been The Talent Show, which is produced by the FT Talent team, Aya Al-Shihabi, and me, Virginia Stagni. Our podcast producer, editor, and sound engineer is Arturo Ochoa, and our social media producer is Letizia Clementi. Our music is by Dennis Kishuk. Check out all of the Talent Show episodes at fttalent.ft.com, subscribe wherever you get your podcast, and follow FT Talent on socials for updates. Until next time, and keep listening.